Baby, I'm done being your wife.
Starting tonight. Cheongdam-dong, Gangnam. Past 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night.
Isabella Conti was sitting upright on the edge of the bed, eyes fixed on her phone screen.
The finger that had just hit send was still trembling barely, but enough to notice.
12 words.
6 years' worth of things shed, swallowed down, packed tight into 12 words. From the study down the hall, Lee Min-ho's keyboard kept going. Click, click, click.
The steady, indifferent sound of a man who hadn't even checked his messages.
Isabella closed her eyes. Isabella Conti,
34 years old.
born in Milan, Italy, black woman.
Her grandmother was from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Her grandfather was Neapolitan. The two of them had found each other on opposite ends of the world, and somewhere in that collision, Isabella was made deep, dark eyes warm. Copper skin and an instinct for space that no school could have taught her. She graduated top of her class from Milan's most prestigious design school, packed 2 suitcases, and landed in Seoul at 26. Within a year, the interior design world was quietly losing its mind over her. And then, at 28, she met Lee Min-ho.
She liked him.
God, she really liked him. The man who'd stood in front of her portfolio in a crisp white shirt and actually meant every word he said. The man who texted her, out of nowhere, "You are someone who shines." Isabella still hadn't deleted that message. It sat in her phone like a stone she couldn't put down. After the wedding, things shifted. Not all at once. Just gradually, the way a room gets cold when someone forgets to close the window. First, it was the late nights at the office. Then weekends disappeared. Then somewhere along the way, Lee Min-ho started answering her mid-sentence with his eyes still on his phone. Isabella closed her studio in their second year of marriage. He never asked her to. It just sort of happened, managing his schedule, prepping dinners for his clients, ironing his dress shirts, until one day she looked up and 6 years had gone by. 6 years. And she couldn't remember the last time she dreamed about seeing her name in a magazine. Honestly, she'd forgotten she ever had that dream at all. It happened that afternoon. She was hanging his dry-cleaned jacket on the rack when she stopped. Something caught in her nose. Faint, sharp, unmistakably feminine. A perfume she did not own. She stood there a long moment, with the jacket still in her hands. And then she laughed. Not cried. Laughed. That surprised her, if she was being honest. Maybe some part of her had already known. Maybe she'd known for a long time and had just been very, very good at looking the other way. She hung the jacket up neatly, walked into the bedroom, picked up her phone. In the study, CEO Lee Min-ho was reviewing Q3 reports. His phone buzzed. His wife. He frowned slightly, glanced at the screen, and read her 12 words. Then a quiet, dismissive little sound, somewhere between a snort and a laugh. Where's she gonna go? He flipped the phone face down on the desk and went back to the report. Click, click, click. The keyboard started up again. From the bedroom down the hall, not a sound. Min-ho didn't find that strange. She was always quiet. Isabella had always been quiet. That was the biggest mistake he ever made. He never once stopped to ask himself what the quiet of a woman like her actually meant. 6:30 the next morning. Min-ho pushed open the bedroom door and walked out. Nothing hit him. No doenjang jjigae bubbling on the stove, no coffee smell, nothing. He shuffled to the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. The table was bare. No pots, no pans, not a single dish out. Isabella's bedroom door was still shut. He opened the fridge. A clump of leftover rice, 1 banchan container. He stared at it, jaw tight, and closed the door. She's not actually serious. 3 days went by. Nobody picked up his dry cleaning. Min-ho showed up to work in a wrinkled shirt. Nobody managed his schedule. He completely blanked on a 2 o'clock meeting, only found out when his assistant called him in a mild panic, and he sprinted out the door half-buttoned. The banchan containers in the fridge emptied out, and nobody refilled them. He started doing slow, suspicious laps around the apartment. Isabella was on the couch with her laptop, expression perfectly calm. Too calm, actually. The kind of calm that starts to feel like a warning. What about dinner? Isabella didn't look up from her screen. I'm not your wife anymore, remember? You said you got the message. Thursday of that week. Song Dong. Down a narrow alley, up to the second floor of an old brick building, Isabella moved slowly through a space thick with 4 years of dust. Her studio shuttered, abandoned, exactly as she had left it. Afternoon light came in sideways through the windows in that particular way Song Dong has, warm and unhurried. She ran a finger along the windowsill and came away grey. She smiled at that. Across the room, Marco Bianchi was perched in a chair. Had been there since Milan, her oldest collaborator, lanky and perpetually rumpled, with a coffee cup practically grafted to his hand. So you're really doing this? Like, for real this time? Isabella dusted off her fingers and nodded. You think it's too late? Marco took a slow sip and shrugged. You've always been a late bloomer, Bella. That's why you last longer than everyone else. Word about the studio got out faster than she expected. All she'd done was post one photo on Instagram, a single drafting pencil lying on a dusty work table. The caption, back. By the next morning, it had been shared 3,000 times. Comments poured in. Finally, we've been waiting. Soul Design just got its pulse back. 2 days later, the office of Chairman Kang from KH Development, the same KH Development that was Lee Min-ho's biggest rival, called her. The offer creative director for a major new mixed-use complex in Gangnam. The signing fee alone was 300 million won. Isabella read the proposal twice, slowly, then typed her reply. He'll consider it. That evening, Min-ho glanced at his wife's phone by accident. He wished he hadn't. KH Development. Those 3 letters hit him like a fist. Chairman Kang, the man had been in a dead sprint against for 3 straight years. Minho's face went still. What is that? Who's that from? Isabella tucked her phone into her bag without breaking her stride. Work. That's from KH Development. He had nothing. Isabella slung her bag over her shoulder and headed for the door. Her heels clicked against the floor, clean, deliberate, each one landing like punctuation. The front door closed behind her. Minho stood alone in the middle of the living room and listened to the silence she left behind. It felt like a sound he'd never heard before. Or maybe it had always been there, and he'd just never once bothered to listen. A cold feeling moved down his spine. You couldn't pick my face out of a lineup for 6 months straight. But somehow you always knew exactly what perfume she was wearing. A corner table at a cafe in Cheongdam-dong. Isabella set an envelope on the table between them. Her hands were steady. Remarkably, almost unnervingly steady. Across from her, Park Soyeon, Lee Min-ho's personal secretary, 4 years on the job, 31 years old, sat with both hands folded in her lap, head down. I'm so sorry, ma'am. Isabella didn't open the envelope. She didn't need to. Every word inside it was already burned into her memory. Soyeon had shown up 3 days earlier. Isabella opened the door to find her standing there in street clothes instead of her work blazer, eyes swollen nearly shut from crying. Isabella stepped back without a word and let her in. Soyeon sat at the kitchen table for a long time and couldn't start. Isabella made 2 cups of coffee. She waited. Didn't push. That was just how Isabella moved through the world. She gave people room to get to wherever they were going. He's been seeing someone. 6 months now. Isabella set down her cup. Who? Soyeon couldn't lift her eyes. Jisoo. Han Jisoo. Your friend. Han Jisoo. She was the first person in Seoul who'd reached out a hand when Isabella didn't know anyone, showed her where the good neighborhood spots were, took her to the market, stayed up late on Chuseok teaching her how to make jeon. The night Isabella shut down the studio, Jisoo had sat across from her with a bottle of soju and cried. Actually cried, saying, "Your talent is too good to just disappear like this." Isabella looked out the window for a long time. Then she turned back to Soyeon. Do you have proof? Soyeon reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Inside photographs. Receipts. Hotel check-in records. Isabella went through them one by one, slow and methodical. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes stayed dry. Instead, something strange happened. Her mind went very, very clear, like a window she'd been peering through for months had finally been wiped clean. She slid everything back into the envelope and looked at Soyeon.
Thank you.
I know this took guts. Soyon broke down right there at the table. Isabella didn't. 2 days after that, an invitation arrived. The annual charity gala hosted by Lehman Hoss Company, Black Tie, Grand Intercontinental Hotel in Gangnam. Same as every year. Isabella opened the card. The interior design director for this year's event, vacant. Word around the industry was that whoever had the job quit without warning 2 months ago. Isabella picked up her phone and called the event coordinator. This is Isabella Conti. I'll be taking over the interior design for the gala. A beat of silence on the other end. Then the coordinator's voice came through, slightly strangled. You yourself? You're doing it personally, Isabella smiled. Personally? Yes. 2 weeks before the gala, on a quiet evening, Minho was scrolling through industry news on his phone when he froze. Her name was right there on his screen. KH Development announces Isabella Conti Design Studio for Gangnam Complex. The comments underneath were already stacking up. Isabella Conti is back. Seoul design scene just flipped the table. Wait, isn't this Minho's wife? He put his phone down, slowly looked toward the bedroom door. It was closed. It had always been closed lately, but tonight it looked different. Heavier than a door had any right to look. He raised his hand to knock. Put it down. Raised it again. Put it down again. He walked back to the couch and sat there, doing nothing. That was the thing about Lee Min-ho. He could watch something he loved slipping away and still not find the words to reach for it. 6 years of quiet, and it took a jacket on a hanger to finally tip it over. Isn't that something? Looking at it from the outside, what Isabella went through wasn't really a marriage falling apart. It was a person disappearing, one small surrender at a time. Until she looked in the mirror one day and barely recognized the woman staring back. The real tragedy wasn't the betrayal. It was how long she'd already been gone before she figured out she was missing. You can get on your knees if you want. I'm just not getting you back up this time. Saturday, 7 in the evening. The ballroom of the Grand Intercontinental Hotel, Gangnam. Chandeliers blazing. 300 guests in cocktail attire. Champagne glasses catching the light. The whole room humming with the comfortable noise of money and small talk. And then Isabella Conti walked in. White off-shoulder gown. Her hair cut short and natural, coils tight against her head. The chandelier light landed on her copper skin like it had been waiting. The room went quiet, 5 full seconds of it, before the murmuring started up again, louder. She walked straight ahead and didn't break stride. Lee Min-ho was standing near the entrance. Black tuxedo, perfect posture. But his face, that was a different story. The second he spotted her, something in his eyes cracked. Beside him, Han Ji-soo, in a pale lavender gown, went rigid the moment their eyes met, and very nearly dropped her champagne glass. Isabella smiled at both of them. Warm. Gracious. The kind of smile that makes people instinctively check their exits. Minho stepped forward. Isabella, what are you doing here? She didn't let him finish. Working. She walked past him and into the room. On the far side of the ballroom, there was a signing table. Chairman Kang of KH Development rose to his feet when he saw her coming. A man pushing 70, spine still straight as a flagpole, he extended his hand. Director Conti, this space is extraordinary. You've outdone yourself, as always. Isabella shook his hand and inclined her head. You're very kind, Chairman. He gestured to the contract on the table, the official agreement for the Gangnam complex. Isabella picked up the pen, signed her name. Across the ballroom, Lee Min-ho watched it happen. The champagne flute in his hand trembled almost imperceptibly. She had just pushed back her chair when he came for her. Fast, cutting through the crowd. Guests were already starting to notice, heads turning. He reached for her arm, stopped himself, and then, right there in the middle of the ballroom floor, he dropped to his knees. The room went silent again. More completely this time. Champagne glasses stopped clinking. 300 pairs of eyes swung toward the two of them and stayed there. Minho looked up at her. Isabella, I was wrong. Please. She looked down at him. No anger in her face. No tears. Just stillness. The deep, settled kind that takes a long time to arrive at. You can get on your knees if you want. I'm just not getting you back up this time. She turned and walked away. Out in the corridor, away from the noise, Han Ji-soo had followed him out. Minho stood with his back to her, staring at the spot where Isabella had disappeared. Jisoo tugged at his sleeve. Minho, I need to tell you something. He didn't turn around. Not now. No now. It has to be now. Her voice got smaller. She bit her lip for a moment, then said it. I'm moving to the States next month. I'm getting married there. He turned around slowly. What? Jisoo looked away. 3 months. I'm sorry. He stood there in that hotel corridor and had absolutely nothing to say. The party was still going on inside. Music leaked through the ballroom doors, bright and bouncy, completely indifferent to the wreckage in the hallway. To Minho, it sounded like it was coming from another country. His wife was gone. And the woman he'd used to fill that hollow had just told him, in a hotel corridor, in front of a party, head organised, that she was leaving to marry someone else. He leaned back against the wall and looked up at the ceiling. The chandelier light pushed faintly into the hallway, soft and diffused, like it didn't want to be here either. His phone rang. The audit team leader from the company. Sir, there's something I need to discuss with you. Are you available to talk? Minho closed his eyes. This wasn't over. There was more. There was still more. It wasn't my wife I lost. It was my whole life. Spring. Second floor of an old brick building in a Seongsu-dong alley. Through the studio's glass windows, cherry blossoms were drifting past. Inside looked nothing like 6 months ago. Every drafting board had a live project spread across it. 3 young designers moved through the space with the particular energy of people who are exactly where they're supposed to be. In the corner, Marco sat with his coffee and scribbled notes on a set of schematic. Isabella stood at the window, watching petals fall into the alley below. It was the first morning in a very long time when she didn't have to rush. A lot had happened that winter. An audit at Lee Min-ho's company had uncovered years of subcontracting fraud. He hadn't been directly involved, but hadn't been directly involved doesn't get a CEO off the hook. And everyone in the industry knew it. The stock dropped. Partners started pulling out, one by one. His name was all over the trade press for weeks. Han Ji-soo quietly left for the States the month after the gala. She sent one text from the airport. Minho didn't reply. And the KH development complex in Gangnam, the one Isabella had designed from the ground up, opened to the public and promptly became the most talked about space in Seoul. Over 20,000 visitors in the first week alone. Minho came to the studio on a Thursday afternoon in April, when the cherry blossoms were at their peak. Isabella opened the door. Head lost weight not a little. He was dressed well, same as always, but his eyes were different. There was something in them Shed genuinely never seen before. Not grief, not guilt. Something smaller and harder to sit with than either of those. Shame. I'm not sure I've got any right to walk in here. She looked at him for a moment, then pulled the door open wider. You can have a cup of coffee. They sat across from each other at the window table. Minho wrapped both hands around his mug and stared at it. He stayed quiet for a long time. Isabella waited. She didn't fill the silence. She never did. Finally, he looked up. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I just don't know what else to start with. Isabella picked up her cup. Keep going. 6 years of everything you gave up. Everything you just handed over without me even asking. I can see it now. It's killing me that I can see it now. He stopped. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. It wasn't my wife I lost. It was my whole life. A single cherry blossom petal spun past the window. Isabella set down her cup. Shed imagined this moment so many times. Him saying exactly this. In those imaginings, Shed done all kinds of things. Cried, yelled, turned her back and walked out. But now that it was actually here, none of that happened. There was no anger, no tears, nothing that moved. Just quiet. She understood then that quiet meant it was done. I forgive you. Minho looked up. But I'm not coming back. That's for me not to punish you. Just for me. He nodded. Slowly. Like it cost him something. After he left, Isabella stood alone in the studio. On one wall, there was a small frame. Shed had it printed years ago, a screenshot of the very first text he'd ever sent her. You are someone who shines. 11 years old now, that message. She took a small piece of paper, handwritten, and pinned it on the wall, right next to the frame. I know. I finally know. From his corner, Marco glanced over and watched her do it. You good? She straightened the frame. Yeah, for the first time, completely. That afternoon, she locked up the studio and walked the Seongsu-dong alley alone. Blossoms were coming down everywhere, covering the ground in pink and white. Isabella stopped walking and held out her palm. A single petal landed in it. She looked at it for a moment. She thought about the 26-year-old who'd gotten off a plane in Seoul with 2 suitcases and 0 fear. That woman. The one who had no business being as confident as she was in a city where she didn't speak the language. What would she think seeing this? Isabella smiled. She thought she'd say, good job. Late, but good job. And maybe she'd add it was never really late. You were always the kind of person who blooms slowly. That's exactly why you last. The petal lifted off her palm and drifted away down the alley. Isabella started walking again. Her steps were light. This was never really a story about revenge. It was about a woman finding her way back to herself, quietly, steadily, without burning anything down. And what was left standing at the end of that walk wasn't fury or grief. It was something warmer than either of those. Something that looked, if you squinted, a lot like spring. So what does a story like this leave with us? We all come into the world knowing, on some level, that we shine. And then life has a way of talking us out of it, one small concession at a time, until we're giving our light away to everyone around us and running on empty ourselves. What Isabella gave up over 6 years wasn't just a career or a studio. It was the part of herself that knew what she was worth. And the road back to that wasn't some dramatic explosion. It was quieter than that. A jacket on a hanger, a text message, a drafting pencil on a dusty table. Sometimes that's all it takes to remind you who you were before you started shrinking. Forgiving someone doesn't mean going back. Knowing your own worth doesn't mean being cruel. And blooming late, it turns out, is still blooming. This story is a work of fiction.